I still get goosebumps when I watch the Beatles play on the rooftop on January 30th, 1969, used in the final part of Let It Be, the original film, and a subsequent Get Back that we recently were given literally as a gift, all 9, 10 hours, whatever it was, of all the footage there. But to this day, every time I watch it, I get goosebumps and I get chills and I get like verklempt in my heart of remembering watching that for the first time. And I still, to this day, can't believe how great they sounded musically as well as vocally in January on a cold rooftop in central London, number 3 Savile Row, the top of Apple offices, with the help of Billy Preston. This video is talking about the original Let It Be, but I will give some background like I usually do. I want to give my personal take on it and my review in essence. But many of you who are watching this have probably seen it. But there's a lot of people, for some reason, just skipped Let It Be the first time around and never saw it and don't really know what it's about. Younger people, people who it seemed depressing at the time, maybe because the timing of the film. But this film hasn't been available for sale since 1981. This is the only time it came out on VHS in 1981. Put out on literally, this is it. This is the copy of Let It Be, the Michael Lindsay Hogg directed film. A breakup of the Beatles, the sadness of when it came out at the time, but also there was a certain beauty. So let's go back in time. In January of 1969, of course, after the previous November in '68, the White Album came out, and Paul McCartney at that point, the last half of the Beatles, arguably, was the leader and the pusher and the coach of the Beatles, really pushing them to do something. And people were splintering in different ways, doing solo projects. Obviously, John and Yoko with their avant-garde and their experimental records, and George Harrison with his music with Ravi Shankar and going to meet up with Bob Dylan, doing Wonderwall films and electronic music, and of course Ringo ends up doing Buku's of Blues, but in the films actually he was doing Magic Christian. But that January they thought about doing a film and documenting them recording their next album. It was going to be a raw album. Now I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because you really should watch both this, the Let It Be original film that's been cleaned up by Peter Jackson and his company, but left faithful the actual content of the Michael Lindsay Hogg film, warts and all. But he cleaned it up, and the audio's great, the picture's great. Right now, for now, it's only available on Disney Plus, and I did stream it twice yesterday. I wanted to see it. It's about an hour and a half, a little less than an hour and a half, and it's definitely worth seeing if you're a Beatle film. And for those who said, "Oh, I saw the whole Get Back, all that footage and everything, I don't need to see this," well, this, in a way, this is the better film. Not to take away from Get Back, but for most people, 7, 8, 9 hours of the Beatles in a studio and recording and working out this music is not for everyone. This is a more dramatic film in a way. Manipulative maybe, but it's what was happening at the time, but it was edited in a certain way that when this came out, it was depressing for some. Now, I'm of the age that I saw this when it happened. Remember, January of '69, they decided to work on this film, make an album, and have some kind of dramatic ending. And Michael Lindsay Hogg thought, maybe we'll do it out in the desert near the pyramids, or I think McCartney or someone suggested Mount Everest, had this ultimate concert at the very end. And basically at the end they said, let's go upstairs on the roof. And that's what happened. And, accidentally it was a brilliant ending and it worked out wonderfully. But when we saw this film in May of 1970, I think it was about a month after Paul McCartney announced he was leaving the Beatles. And so the Beatles, we heard, split up. Now, obviously, in hindsight, we didn't know if they were going to ever get back together again. Was this temporary? And a month before this movie and the subsequent album came out, McCartney puts out his first solo album, literally a few weeks before, pissing off the other three Beatles obviously. But again, these stories you can read in books and watch documentaries and watch other YouTube videos. But I remember going to see this film in May. I don't know if it was the first night it came out, but I was so excited. Now, on one side, it was a depressing look at them. The beginning there at Twickenham Studios, a large, cavernous film and TV studio, coldness to it, and you can see it in the first part of this film, Let It Be, more than anything. Shot in 16 millimeter, grainy as hell. When we saw that projected on the screen and it was blown up to, I suppose, 35 millimeter, the grains were like as big as a 57 Buick or something. It was pretty dark, and you can see them wearing these heavy coats and just chilling and everything. But there is some brilliance in that, and we've never up to this point saw the Beatles in the studio recording. There might have been a couple of still photos, a couple of bits here and there for some of the filmed performances of singles, but never just them working and working. And in a way, very raw. This was supposed to be more of an innocent album, a raw album. Now, I remember seeing the film, and I went to Tower Records in San Francisco, and I bought this. It was right side up when I bought it. I bought this. Now, this is the original UK box. Unfortunately, in America, it didn't come with the box or the book. And the book is the gem in this, as well, obviously, the record and the music. Now, my box and my tray has fallen apart since. Not very well constructed. My book, though, is intact. So let's get into this and take a look at this. Most of these photographs were by Ethan Russell. If you watch the documentary, you'll see a photographer running around taking pictures in both Twickenham at 3 Savile Row. And this is a wonderful book that came with the original pressing with some dialogue from the film, from the Nagra tapes. Now, the Nagra tapes, if you don't know what a Nagra is, it's a portable recording that's usually used to sync up and record while you're doing documentary style and location work of a film back in those days, back in the 60s into the 70s. And that's why when we all heard bootlegs, we heard this beep every once in a while. So I will show you this right there, the original UK record. This is a New Phase Beatle album, essential to the content of the film. Let It Be was that they performed live for many of the tracks. It comes the warmth and the freshness of a live performance as reproduced by disc by Phil Spector. Now, this film was not originally meant to come out in the way it did. It didn't come out for a year and a half later. It was scrapped. They felt it wasn't a success. It was cold. It was depressing to them. And of course, a few months later, they get back in the studio, record what would become Abbey Road. Abbey Road is released just to much fanfare. Some consider it their best album, their best sounding album in September, I believe, of 1969. And then, of course, Lennon gives these tapes to Phil Spector, and this comes out. Now, I am a fan of this record. I'm a fan of the sound of this record. I think Phil Spector really saved it. And there is a version that came out in the box set, the Get Back box set, that has the original mix by Glenn Johns. I'm not a fan of that at all. It was going to be called Get Back. In 1970, before the album came out, I remember I was down in Los Angeles and I saw a sign in a record store. I think it was on Hollywood Boulevard, as I recall. And I was 15 and a half years old, and it said, "The Beatles Get Back in Stock." And this is what it was. One of the first bootlegs. The first bootleg really is considered to be Great White Wonder by Bob Dylan. Now, I did color this in. Was this the first version? There were various pressings of bootlegs at the time. I also wrote my own track list on it. Of course, this is what a 15-year-old would do. It says 1970, a real underground record. Of course, Beatles bootleg. This is not the first version, but there you go. There's the label on that one. there were several versions, many versions, in fact, eventually would come out. Bootlegs. This was a trademark of Quality Volume 2 with more tracks from these Nagra tapes. These originated from someone getting hold of the Nagra tapes, and that's why you go through these and you hear all these beeps and noises on here. Version and 3, Get Back Sessions 2. A lot of times you'll see these little inserts in here. And then I have just random other ones of bootlegs. This is Let It Be from the soundtrack. Another bootleg. I listed all the track list. There's more Get Back Sessions. And then, of course, these contain a variety of things, not just from Get Back. And these are, what are these? Sweet Apple Tracks 1 and 2 here. Some years later, I think this was into the 1980s, I got this. I got this in New York at in Greenwich Village at a record store. I think I paid about $120 for this. This is multi-CDs. This is 10 CDs of, in theory, all the sound, all the audio from the Nagra tapes of the Get Back sessions. So there's a lot of bootlegs, obviously, now with the internet. In a way, to some people, these are moot, but it's really great to have the physical product. In America on record, we got Let It Be this way. We got a gatefold. And in America, we got it on the red Apple label opposed to the green Apple. McCartney, the revisionist he was some years later, and this came out in 2003, and this was Let It Be Naked. And what happened is he stripped back pretty much all the spectrization, all the vocal choruses, all the orchestration. I think this is a really interesting record. I think it's an alternative. I love the Spectre version, the final version, better. This should come back, but I don't know why they didn't release it at the time of the Get Back set, the Get Back box. But this is the Let It Be Naked. Everything stripped back, basically an unplugged version of the Beatles. Pretty much what you see in the film, in the Get Back film and the Let It Be film. And then, of course, in 2022, the Get Back 9-hour extravaganza showed on Disney Plus and eventually came out on Blu-ray here. So this is a fascinating thing. I think I know, I watched it with several friends and they enjoyed it, but I think some people get bored for the long thing. But if you're a Beatle fan, this is the way to see everything, and it's a great way to see everything. And of course, there were various formats. This is the vinyl format of the Let It Be box, which emulates Get Back, and it has, of course, the proper album. It has the Glyn John mix with the cover that was intended. That's why when you see those red and blue albums and you see the Beatles recreate the Please Please Me cover at Manchester Square EMI House here in 1969, that was going to be this cover, and this is how it was designed. I do have a bootleg of this as well with this cover, and of course the book and all of the extras on here. And it's a great way to really revisit Let It Be and Get Back and see what it could have been, but it wasn't that. Then a few months after the Get Back film debuted on the Disney Channel, they had a special one-day showing at IMAX theaters around the country, around the world, in fact. This was on January 30th, so it would have been the anniversary of the day they did the rooftop concert. And this was in IMAX, a 1-hour presentation. I think the whole concert is 25 minutes, but there was a lead into it. There was an introduction by Peter Jackson talking about the restoration project. And this was amazing. This gave me goosebumps. Seeing it large screen, seeing them perform in that cold day in January on the rooftop, playing so wonderfully. Several songs they would repeat, 2 or 3 songs, I believe, they repeated when they were making the film. They weren't all included in the original Let It Be film, but this was amazing. And this is on the Blu-ray, but seeing it in IMAX just was a stunner, literally a stunner. So let's talk about Let It Be. I just watched it twice on the Disney Channel, and I want to say I was skeptical. Not that I wouldn't like it because I know the movie. I saw the movie in theaters and remember thinking how wonderful it was to see the Beatles play, the rawness of them. But over the years, obviously, there's been this whole idea. People remember mostly, it seems, aside from the rooftop concert, that little argument between George and Paul, where Paul is really directing and really pushing this and almost telling George how to play. And George saying, look, I'll play whatever you want. Tell me what to play. If you don't want me to play, I won't play at all, type of thing. And that really sparked, back in 1970, if you saw it then, that really made people talk. That was something that was really apparent there. They looked tired, especially the stuff in Twickenham in that cold, large, cavernous TV studio, film studio. They look tired. They don't have makeup on. You see at the very beginning, Ringo looks like he either just woke up, like he couldn't give a crap for being there. There is a beauty. One really wonderful scene is when George and Paul and Ringo are working on "I Me Mine," and you see John and Yoko dancing the waltz. So in May 1970, seeing that film, there were works in progress and songs that were on Abbey Road. Of course, at that point, we already had heard Abbey Road, and we knew the songs like Maxwell's Silver Hammer and Old Darlin'. And it really gave us a different view of these songs, really rough and really, there was strains in some of the voices. But when the movie cuts to 3 Savile Row and they get out of that dark, cold cavern studio and they go to the basement of 3 Savile Row, we see the Beatles kind of really coming together in a way. There's a warmth there. And also the big difference is Billy Preston comes in. He's not announced in the film and Let It Be. He's just there. He's never announced. He's never mentioned at this point in the film, but he's just playing with the Hammond organ with them. And you see a more of a connection with the music and a more of a warmth. I really like that section, and it starts again. It goes from cold in the cavernous studio to the warmth of 3 Savile Row, and then a little more than halfway in the Let It Be film, there's a section that really changes it up, and all of a sudden you come from this world and these visuals of the Beatles, sort of rough and just not really always in tune, and their vocals they're finding the song in some cases, and they're developing the song. And I can totally see how an artist wouldn't want this stuff out initially, but a year and a half about after they recorded this in January '69, this film finally comes out and attached with the Let It Be record, which what would become their final album released, even though Abbey Road was the final album recorded. This was sort of their send-off. Beatles has split up, and we see this sort of rough and tumble new phase, as it says on the liner notes of that. But there is that section, a little over halfway through the film. There's 3 wonderful performances from beginning to end. Everything else pretty much before that was, a cut-up section, a portion of a film, a rehearsal of a film, them developing it. And they do 3 songs, bang-up songs right in a row that sound amazing. And they're almost pretty much lockdown shots with a couple of cutaways. You have first them doing Two of Us, a beautiful rendition. Paul and John's vocal harmonies are just stunning in that. The acoustic guitar. George Harrison doing almost like a bass riff on his Telecaster, that beautiful rosewood Telecaster. And then you have Let It Be, just that beautiful McCartney looking at his lyrics and looking at the camera, and then George doing the lead and them doing the harmonies, that beautiful gospel type song that Paul wrote. Let It Be, I think it's just a stunner. And then they do a really beautiful version of The Long and Winding Road, and beautiful harmonies by the other Beatles. Paul again singing and at the piano. The piano playing is stunning on that version. I quite like earlier on when they did a sort of kitschy calypso version of it, sped up. I would like to hear a whole, version of that start to finish. But that's the section there. And of course, after that, they ascend to the roof of Savile Row, and you have that wonderful build-up when you have them playing in that cold weather, so tight, so connected. And even after a couple of songs, they start cutting away to people on other rooftops, people out of windows, people on the streets, and eventually the cops coming in. Now, we learned, years later and in the Get Back film that there was a camera in the lobby of Savile Row. That's why it looked a little set up when I first saw it. I remember when I was young, where the doorman opens the door from the inside. So you have an outside shot and an interior shot. Looks like, hey, wait a second, that's set up. They had I think they were planning on this, but you see how that happened in the Get Back, the 10-hour version of Get Back. The color, the grain is gone, but it's not phony. It doesn't take away from it. In fact, it kind of allows you just to enjoy the film as cinema. It's not one of those, films when someone tries to colorize a black and white film or make it something it's not. There's no AI bullshit in this film. Now, over the years, I've probably seen Let It Be 20 times. I think when it first came out, I think I saw it about 3 times in the theater. And then every once in a while it would come through in the retrospective houses. But then by then you'd see copies that were cut up and scratched, and never a great copy until this. But you get VHS, it's a decent copy. It's a decent transfer. It's nothing wonderful. The sound is nothing wonderful. So I haven't really seen a great version until now. Now, I know in the past week they had certain screenings, theatrical screenings for private. I would have loved to have seen it, that version. Maybe someone will invite me to a version. Maybe it'll show up. I don't know if this is going to come out in Blu-ray. I assume at some point this new version, this cleaned up version, will come out on Blu-ray. But I want to say this was one of the best times I've ever seen this film since 1970, since I got chills the first time I saw the Beatles just really being together, not acting like in Help and Hard Day's Night, not some random interview, but obviously McCartney and especially is mugging the camera. Sometimes John occasionally reacts to the camera, but he's with Yoko and he's doing his thing. There's a seriousness to them occasionally, and there's a jokiness to this. There's some wonderful moments here. I always like the moment Ringo is working on the song he wrote, Octopus's Garden, and George really helps him out. George helps him out with a chord progression, a chord change, and he plays with them. And then George Martin kind of comes in frame and sings a little bit of a kind of a response thing. It could be an instrumental passage that I think was used in the final recording of that on Abbey Road. But I think this is a success, and I think it made me enjoy Let It Be more than ever again, except for that maybe first time when I enjoyed it for a different reason. Because remember, in 1970, we didn't see this kind of performance. We didn't see the looseness of a band. Now there's been documentaries, going on, decades, where you see the rawness of a band. Bands like Wilco performing, Metallica, the Eagles, and all these Tom Petty working on and working things out, and the darkness. But remember, in the 60s, with actors and with musicians, you really wanted to protect them. There was no, the bad side of things. Magic Moves Tour maybe was a successful failure, if you will. Great music and an avant-garde thing that no one understood what it was at the time. It's, I think, gained stature in terms of being something experimental, and the performances and the music of that is amongst the best the Beatles ever did. But Let It Be, I think, it closes the chapter, and it doesn't, we've now have a chance to see beyond this. But I think this, in its own 90 minutes or so, it says 80 minutes here on the back, okay, 80 minutes or so, just is a beautiful part of the story. The fourth Beatle film, if you count Yellow Submarine, and a fitting end, a sad end to a point, but a legacy. I think this is okay. And in closing, let me just talk about the music again. Two of Us is beautiful, sort of folky country song. The harmonies, the acoustic guitars, just amazing. I Dig a Pony, they do that on the roof top, and it is a stunner. I love that song. Across the Universe, arguably John Lennon's best lyric. Of course, when George Martin was asked what's his favorite lyric, he answers Across the Universe. I Me Mine, again, as I said, that great Harrison waltz. Dig It, obviously, and Let It Be, you see the full clip, what happens before and after. And Phil Spector, in an interesting way, takes that little clip like a Rolling Stone, and he just sticks it on this album as a bridge into Let It Be, the beautiful version of Let It Be. Hark the Angel Come, and that Paul McCartney starts that wonderful piano intro. And of course, Maggie May on here. And then I've Got a Feeling, great Lennon and McCartney kind of back and forth. What a beautiful song. And they do that song wonderfully, a beautiful version on the rooftop, a wonderful rockin' version. And you got that great McCartney vocal on that, especially. Long and Winding Road, you know, sappy to some, but a gorgeous, you can't deny how beautiful that song is, and McCartney's lyrics, one of his better lyrics. You got the wonderful Lennon song, For You Blue, that wonderful blues song, and Lennon playing the lap guitar, slide guitar, and Harrison talking about Elmore James, got nothing on this baby, the great Elmore James. I discovered Elmore James because of this. I had no idea who that great blues slide player was. And of course, Get Back. It's funny, Get Back has never been one of my favorites, but they nail it on here. And of course, at the end, you know, the police are going to arrest you, and McCartney sings out on the rooftop. And what a great ending. What a great film. I think this is a success. It's not a cash grab. It's basically a restoration of an important film in rock and roll cinema. So thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Put your comments. And you know, if you don't have Disney Plus, wait for the Blu-ray. I think it will happen eventually. Mazzy loves you. Thanks a lot.